everyone. So I may see some familiar faces. I may be a familiar face. I was here at the last presentation with the Alzheimer's Association. Raise of hands, was any of you on the last presentation? Oh, so we got some good new faces. All right, good. We were downstairs the last time I was here, so this is beautiful. I've been to this community before, but haven't been up here. It's gorgeous, gorgeous. So, well, again, thank you all so much for having me. I'm Diane Ferran. I'm the program manager with the Alzheimer's Association, what we call the San Antonio and South Texas chapter. We are a national nonprofit organization. Our home offices are in Chicago, but there is a chapter office that covers every county throughout the United States. Our particular chapter, we are housed here in San Antonio, just up the way on 410 in Blanco, right by Castle Hills, or in Castle Hills. But we cover 43 counties total. So we go all the way down to the valley, a little bit to the west, and then there are 6 chapters in the state of Texas alone, right? Everything bigger in Texas, right? We have to have our own region, so there are lots of us that cover all those counties. So really our goal as a nonprofit, we definitely, the main thing is we want to end this disease, right? Unfortunately, there is no cure for Alzheimer's and their dementia. We'll talk a little bit about that. But in the meantime, there's a lot of research being done. This is a research-based presentation. We have a whole medical science team, amazing individuals around the country, around the world, that are trying to find a cure for this disease. And also then to talk about what are risk factors, right? What are things that we can do that can hopefully help reduce our risks for developing something like this. I will say it's probably, I like to jump the gun sometimes because I think these are things in my head and I'm thinking people probably think that immediately, and a lot of questions we get is, is this hereditary, right? Is this a given that as I'm getting older that I'm going to get this disease? And we absolutely say no, right? It is not a given just as you grow older. Unfortunately, the risk factor for getting this disease is age, so all of us that are aging have a risk for it. But the more we talk about it, we'll talk about this presentation, is they looked at several risk factors, and so how do we, I would say if you're doing this, some of this may be a refresher for you. I hope this is, if you're doing some great routines, we'll talk about that. So it's kind of 2 parts. If you're doing some great things, we want to hear about it, maybe others can learn, maintaining, validating what you're doing, and then some it's just a reminder, right? Sometimes we know what we should be doing. It's not always easy, right? So maybe just that kind of pause again to go, yeah, I need to work on that area. That's something I really need to think about. So it's really just kind of what this presentation is. We talk about modifiable factors with this disease and what we can look at to kind of maintain our healthy lifestyle, right? And we know, right, we're never too old to start, to continue, to restart, those kinds of things, right? So I am very informal. I'm going to go through the presentation. I'll take a pause every so often, but if you're like, Diane, I really want to ask this question, please just raise your hand, stop me. I will be happy to address a question, things that you all have, but again, we'll just go through the presentation, okay? So again, I mentioned this is research-based. So again, there were researchers around the country through the association that really looked at these areas. And again, those behaviors that affect our brains and bodies. So right, a lot of what the science is telling us is, if you've heard before, like what is good for our heart is good for our brain. Right? So we really believe in that. Mainly because we look at, what does our heart do, right? It's pumping all that good oxygen, right, around our body, especially to our brain. About 25% of the oxygen that's pumped through, or the blood that's pumped through the heart, is going to the brain. So it's carrying all those good nutrients, right? All those things that your brain needs to stay healthy. So obviously, the more that we can do for our heart health, then we're doing for our brain health as well, right? So we looked at some areas. Again, there's some strategies for healthy decision making. So we're going to look at these particular areas. Not that obviously there could be other areas that you may think about it that you're doing, but these were again kind of areas that they looked at that were really most effective or kind of most risk factors with this disease, right? So you can see here sleep, smoking, mental health, physical activity, a balanced nutrition, cognitive engagement, and social engagement. And again, we'll go through each one of those throughout the presentation. So again, I told you I love to jump the gun because I know some of this information, and I've learned so much. So I'm a social worker. I've worked with older adults my entire career. I've been with the association almost 6 years, and I'm just always enjoying the more and more I can still learn about things. I thought I knew some things, and I'm still learning, right? We all are still learning. So again, when we look at the brain's really, right, the control center of the body. We kind of equate it to, right, the engine of your car, right? You think when the engine goes down, right, nothing else in your car works, right? Basically similar to the brain, right? Your brain has 100 billion nerve cells, neurons that create this branch, right? So everything's talking to each other, right? Your brain is telling your heart to beat. Your brain is telling your lungs to inflate, deflate, right? So all of these things that are happening. Unfortunately, why again we talk about this, so Alzheimer's affects and other dementia. It starts to affect those brain cells. It develops what we call plaques and tangles. So when all those good neurons are talking, I think there's another picture here. I'm gonna go forward a little bit. So yeah, kind of you see that picture, right? So that's what, right, is going on in your brain. All these good these synapses, all these things that are connecting, that are talking, right? They're telling, again, for you to hear, for you to see. Now what happens with Alzheimer's disease is it develops what we call plaques and tangles. So they start to develop on these connections and they start to break them down. So that's why you might see people get forgetful, right? People have memory loss, right? All these things that are affecting the brain, and it's literally shrinking. And it starts to what we call, now I'm thinking of the word, I lost the word now. Atrophy, right? So it's starting to really shrink. And we say Alzheimer's. I will say, kind of give a back up a little bit. I'll use the term Alzheimer's. Sometimes the presentation will use that more often, but we say Alzheimer's and other dementia, meaning that dementia, if you've heard that term as well, we're like, is it the same thing as Alzheimer's? What's the difference? What's the same, right? The similar things. Dementia is what we call the umbrella term. It's similar, again, I equate it to cancer, right? So it is the symptoms that are happening, right? With dementia, that means there's changes in cognition, thinking, memory, mood, things that are changing and affecting someone's daily life, right? Again, similar to cancer, right? But think of all the different types of cancers there are, right? Similar to dementia. There are many different types of dementia. We use Alzheimer's because it just happens to be the most prevalent. So about 60 to 80% of people that are diagnosed with dementia have Alzheimer's related dementia. It's because of where it's happening in the brain too. Alzheimer's tends to start in the middle of the brain, and then it can spread out. But there's also Parkinson's related dementia. Individuals with Parkinson's have about a 50% unfortunate chance of developing dementia. There's also dementia with Lewy body, if you've ever heard that. It's a protein that develops in the front part of the brain. So again, there are close to 100 causes of dementia. So that's why I just want to make sure you understood that, because again, people say, well, you say both words, and what does that mean? So just trying to give you a baseline of what we talk about, right? So again, so this is just that interrelation, right? Again, the idea that, again, 20-25% of the blood that comes from every heartbeat is going to your brain. Think about that, that's a lot, right? So when we want to make sure our heart is working well, right, the idea that making sure, because all that good oxygen that's carrying those nutrients and everything that our brain needs to stay healthy is coming from there. Okay, so we do a little quiz, right? So is Alzheimer's a normal part of aging? Oh, no, right? Gave that answer earlier, right? So that is false, right? So Alzheimer's, again, is a progressive fatal brain disease. So typically, symptoms do start slow and get worse over time, right? So that's also a key that we tell individuals. It should be a progressive, depending on what type of dementia it is, right? So if you see someone overnight, right, changing, or like it seems immediate, we kind of tell people there may be something else going on, right? It may not be dementia, it could be another medical issue, right? But we want to make sure that people are just kind of keeping an eye on that. But it's something that should not be happening like right overnight. There should have been some kind of signs and symptoms that have kind of progressively been happening, right? So again, Alzheimer's and other dementia are not a normal part of aging, so I kind of went over, right? So dementia, again, is that general term. It just describes those changes. It's kind of saying, I have these symptoms, right? Could it be a form of dementia? And then again, Alzheimer's is just the most common. Unfortunately, there is no cure, but I won't talk too much about that. We have a whole presentation a research presentation that maybe we can come back and do for y'all. I think it's very insightful, but at a language and terminology that we can all understand, right? We listen to our bedside people, and their brains are, sometimes it goes past me. I get lost in all of what they do. They're amazing, but we do have a presentation that kind of breaks it down a little bit easier to understand. But in the last few years, there is hope. We have had some medications that have been, again, very hopeful and very positive in showing that they're actually slowing some of the signs. But we talk about early detection and why we do these presentations, because the earlier you detect, maybe the earlier you may find these things, then these medications and things would hopefully work for you, right? We don't want to wait until somebody's in a more, later stages, right, when these things aren't gonna be beneficial. And again, some of the healthy behaviors may lower the risk of dementia, right? So that's why we look at kind of this overall, right? We want to make sure we're looking at our overall health. So these are kind of some areas too, right? It's not just one aspect that we need to look at. So we always look at, right, genes in our family history. Unfortunately, we can't get away from some of those things, right? I've been trained since I was 16. It's a family trait. I can't control that, right? We can't control, a lot of times how we, right, our physical features of how we age. We're thinking, gosh, some people have more wrinkles than I do, right? We're the same age. That's genetics, right? Those are things we can't control. Environment. We do look at some things on, again, we'll talk about nutrition and things like that, but, we do have to look at some of our environments and again, our lifestyle. So things that we're doing right to either stay active or all those areas of our life that we want to kind of, right, holistically look at, right? So those healthy habits. So again, right, I think these are always key too. I think some people too get very caught up in the physical, right? Our weight loss. Well, our certain numbers, right, that we have for our weight. Do we look thin? Are we skinny enough, right? Because we think that's healthy. But I always need to make sure people understand you could be the thinnest person, but if your lab work, if your numbers aren't good, right, that's an issue, right? You could have a few more pounds, right? But when you go and your A1C and your blood pressure is good, right, that's what you want to look at, right? That's what tells our doctors and our healthcare providers that, we're doing well, right? Again, just because we physically, right, thinking of those things. I tell people I have a best friend who's amazing. She works out, goes to the gym all the time, but she was so upset because she had to be put on cholesterol medication. That's genetics, right? She's done all she could to push it off, but genetically, there's some things that predisposition us, right, to get those kinds of things. So, she still makes sure that she does work out and maintain, but that cholesterol number is, again, if you look at her, you would think she's in full, healthy physical, but her numbers said differently, right? So kind of making sure that we're looking and we're talking to our doctors, not just about, right, the way we physically, our weight and things like that, but what are our numbers looking like, right? So just kind of that holistic kind of thing, right? So, and again, this is all science-based, right? So what is the science telling us? So the science is telling us that factors that increase the risk of heart disease and stroke, right? Which again, some of you all probably heard this already, right? I mean, hypertension, diabetes, midlife obesity, right? So there's things that when we talk about Alzheimer's and dementia, these are risk factors. So, if you have these certain other diagnoses, then it could potentially increase your risk, right? So, and again, good cholesterol, right? Cholesterol is that thing that we look at when it's good for your heart. If your heart's in good condition, then that cholesterol should be at a good level too, right? So again, another little, right? It's never too early or too late to incorporate healthy habits. True or false? True. Always true, right? No matter what age you are, right? There's always, we can benefit at any age, right? From either adding or continuing our healthy habits. Okay. So this is kind of where we're going to actually go into, right, each of these areas I had originally talked about, right? So again, these tips for your healthy living and for your brain and body, these are the areas that we're going to talk about, and we'll go individually into them. All right, so the first one is good quality sleep. That's a tough one. Is it tough for anybody else? Does anybody else have problems? If you don't, that's wonderful, right? So we know that sleep is, right, essential for our overall health and well-being. So these are, again, some kind of things that we look at, right? So what's the science telling us, right? Sleep impacts our overall health, right? It does help in maintaining, right, a healthy blood pressure and blood sugar. And so obviously inadequate sleep can cause some problems with memory or thinking, right? It's the idea that, you get deep, you're in a deep enough sleep, right? They call that REM sleep, right? That your brain, so the idea is that your brain is getting that rest, right? I mean, you want your brain to function, right? That's what you're doing all day. If you have busy things you're doing all day long, that you really want your brain to have that good rest. Right? But sometimes insomnia, there are medical conditions, sleep apnea, right, that we definitely recommend. Not only are you not, right, you're not breathing, but if you get those things that you can put into place, right, the CPAP machines, right, that's going to help you with that, right? So you definitely want to look at, and what again, I think the bottom line for a lot of this is, are we talking to our doctors? Are we making sure that our doctors know what's going on so that we can address those issues, right? To make sure that we're getting those things that we need. So really looking at that, right? So when we look again at sleep, right? So they say that, right, adults should aim for no less than 6 hours of rest at night. Interesting. I hope that's the case. I told my doctor, I don't think that's but I've also had a doctor tell me, right, as long as if you wake up in the morning and you feel refreshed, right, I think that's a key feeling too, as opposed to waking up in the morning and feeling like you just want to go right back to sleep. That may be a good indicator that maybe you're not getting, right, the sleep that you need, whatever's good for you, right? That's what the doctor kind of said. Diane, think about that. If you wake up and you're like, okay, I feel like I feel fresh, as opposed to, no, I'm just going to stay in bed because I don't feel like I've gotten enough sleep, right? So really, and sometimes there may be interruptions, right, of how we sleep. Getting up to go to the bathroom, right, that is common things, right, as we get older too. Really thinking about, yes, but again, the idea that if you have to get up and use the restroom, but can you come back to sleep and get back to sleep, right? I've had people tell me, once I get up, I can't go back to sleep, right? That could be a problem, but we know there's some things, right, that can be happening. But again, these are really some things to think about. What kind of environment helps you sleep? I always think that, people talk about their morning routines, right? You have a routine when you get up. Do you have a routine when you go to sleep? Does anybody want to share? Think about it. What do you do that helps you, when you start to get ready for sleep, what do you do? Would you like to share? You look like you're thinking about your routine. Yeah.
Oh, I climb in bed, pull up the covers, close my eyes, and go to sleep.
Oh, you are good. You are good.
It takes at least 2 or 3 minutes to get
Oh
to
my
sleep.
gosh, I am so jealous of
I
you.
thank God that's one problem I do not have.
I am so jealous of you. I'm jealous. Yes, that's good. But again, right, some people, yes, ma'am.
As soon as I know it's time for me to go to bed, like the story is over, then I lay down, and that's prayer time for me.
Absolutely.
And I go over all the things that happen during the day, the things that are supposed to happen tomorrow, and that little sign that says, leave it to Him,
Yes.
to God, and go to sleep.
Absolutely.
When I find myself waking up while I was praying.
Okay. Thinking
So
about
that's
that,
my
yeah.
prayer time.
That's me. My dad has that pillow that says that. Leave it, yeah, because he has a problem sleeping, yes. Absolutely, but you think about, right, so sometimes it's just, I remember we said, some of this is just to take a pause to think about, do I have a routine when I sleep, for sleep? Again, I told my doctor, I will always share myself. I am not ashamed to say I have good habits, I have bad habits. Same thing with my doctor. I tell my doctor, she's like, Diane, well, what are you doing right before you go to bed? Well, I'm on my phone, or I'm on my iPad, right? So she's like, Diane, you're stimulating your brain. Like, it's too much stimulation before you go to bed. And I'm like, I know, right? So there's even like studies, like you can go online, there's different universities. She told me, I forgot what it was, but some university that they actually have, they have guidelines, like to help you make a routine, right? So do I need time, right? I need so much time to say my prayers. I need to, turn off all the lights, right? It needs to be quiet. Some people I need a rain machine. I like the sound of rain, right? So again, just really think about what works for you, or if you don't really have a sleep routine, think about it. Maybe I should have, if you don't, if you're having problem sleeping, maybe I should have a routine that helps me kind of, right, being peaceful. A lot of times too, people like to journal, right, because they've had so many things go on in the day, they're worried, and then I kind of think that once you write it down, right, kind of let it go, so your brain's not thinking so much about it, right before you go to bed. So, right, what are those things that you can do? Again, just an idea. Have a routine when you wake up. You probably should have a routine when you go to sleep, right? Think about that, whether it's half an hour before you go to bed, 10 minutes before you go to bed, 2 minutes before you go to bed, that's amazing. Right, just thinking about, and sometimes for people, right, how do you minimize some disruptions too? And sometimes it's hard, right? You can't always, if you can't control that environment, it can be challenging, but also thinking about, are there ways that you can minimize some of those disruptions that may be happening, right? So again, those tips, right? Controlling the room or temperature, right? That can be key for people too. Some people like it really cold. Some people like it really warm when they go to sleep, right? What works for you, right? It does tell you, right? Turn off those screens before bedtime, right? That helps you wind down, right? And again, if you're doing all those things, if you go, okay, you know what? I'm trying this routine for a week. Great, I see the improvements. But if you're really trying and you're finding that you're still struggling, right, again, we want to say, please talk to your doctor, right, because there could be other things that are going on, right, bladder issues, again, sleep apnea, things that may not be aware of, that can be addressed, that can help you get the sleep that you need, right? Okay. Any questions or any questions on sleep or any things that you want to share about? Sorry.
If you have trouble sleeping at night, and you nap during the day, does it make up for your quality sleep at night?
That's a good one. I hear that a lot where it actually, most of the time I hear it in a little bit more of a negative experience, right? Where if you're napping too much, then obviously you're going to be awake at night, right? We talk a lot about that with families, with caregivers, with individuals living with dementia, because, right, they'll say, well, gosh, my loved one, I can't sleep because my husband just is up all night, he's up. So I asked, well, what did he do during the day? Oh, he just likes to sleep in his chair and, all day. He just sits in front of TV and sleeps. So we say, okay, we might need to get more activity, right? The more active we are, then obviously we're tired and we want to go to bed, right? But that's a good point, is that you think about what are you doing during the day. Naps, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not a doctor. I think sometimes naps, I've heard are good for your body, right, people? And sometimes your body's just so tired, it's just telling you you need a little bit of a rest. But then if it's happening frequently, where you're finding you're spending more time napping or sleeping during the day, well, again, you're most likely going to be up at night, right? So really thinking about those patterns too during the day, but that's a very good point. But I always kind of direct them to say, talk to the doctor about, again, think about how much time, or maybe jotting that down, how much time am I sitting in front of the TV or sleeping, or not being as active, which we'll talk about, because, right, to me, it's kind of logical that if you're not as active, then you're, right, you might be up because you're sleeping, or you're a little bit more sedentary, right, during the day.
But does napping during the day
Help
your...
Yeah, with that, honestly, I am not sure. That's why I said I would talk to the doctor. That part I have not heard if that is a good thing particularly, or a bad thing. I haven't heard either or. I would definitely talk to the doctor about those kinds of things if you find that it's affecting your sleep one way or the other. Yeah, I haven't heard. Sorry, yeah, not that I'm so aware of. Smoking, right? I will not. Unless there's somebody, is there anybody here that's worried about smoking or smoking cessation? Okay, sometimes it's the audience. I tell people, right? I think when we're at a certain age or in a certain environment, we're not smoking, hopefully. Or if we are, we know, right? It is a tough thing, but we know that quitting smoking can reduce a person's chance of cognitive decline, right? Mainly because that nicotine, right? Smoking really kind of constricts our vessels, right? So remember, if all that good oxygen and blood isn't going to our brain, right, that's going to cause some problems, right? So again, it's just those habits, right? If we can think about them, what's affecting us, Is it enough to, really see a doctor about how do I need to stop this particular habit? That's not so great. So I'm gonna go a little bit, like I said, I wanted to go quickly past that because I find that depending on certain, audiences, that may not be pertinent. The next one that we're gonna talk about, right, is gonna be mental health, right? Making time for self-care, which is not easy, not something we think about too often. But really, right, paying attention to our stress levels, right? Anything that causes us anxiety, depression, other concerns, because we know that these can affect the health of your brain, right? So definitely, and healthy habits, right, contribute to good mental health. It's kind of that, right, it's one or the other. So really thinking about, right, so we talk about, and this is one thing, again, we focus a lot on, okay, good exercise, right, good, I'm doing nutrition, but we don't always think about our mental health, right? And again, that is coming, right, our brain, right, that's being affected. Some people, right, do need to take medications for depression, so that is, right, something that is actually physically going on, or chemically going on with our brain. So you really have to make sure you're addressing that. If it is an issue that's happening where, you really feel and your doctor feels like you should be on medication to manage that, right? And so when we talk about mental health, again, it's also taking a pause, right? What are those things I enjoy doing, right? How can I build breaks into my day? And how can I focus on self-care, right? Again, I think that can be challenging for some people because sometimes we think self-care equates to being selfish. Not the case, right? We are not selfish if we want to make sure that we're being taken care of. I especially tell this to family caregivers, right? As a spouse, as a child, when you're helping to take care of somebody else, right? You cannot continue to do that unless you're taking care of yourself, right? Think about it, even just as a couple or in a relationship, whatever that means, that can be tough for individuals, right? Dealing with dementia or other acute chronic illnesses, they focus so much on their loved one, right? Oh, we gotta get you to your appointments, we've gotta make sure you're taken care of, and then they forget about themselves, right? And then their health starts to decline. And you think about, well, if I'm not here to take care of that person, who is, right? And if there's nobody else, then you wanna be doing what you need to do to take care of yourself in order to help take care of that other person, right? So we say it's not selfish, it's making sure that you're the best caregiver, the best person that you can be, physically healthy, right, mentally, all around. So really, right, thinking about those things that you enjoy, right? So, see, and this one, it actually says, right, tips for self-care, take a nap. So obviously it may sound like that is probably a good thing. If your body's telling you, I am tired, I need to take a nap. So here it's kind of telling you self-care includes taking a nap, going for a walk, right, dance, singing a song. I'm sure it sounds like y'all have a lot of good activities here, right? So when you partake in all those good fun activities, right, you're doing all of that. Think about that when you're doing all that for yourself, right, and for others. Reading a book, right, watching a funny video. Does somebody want to share something that you like to do that you think is good, that you enjoy, that gives you joy, that how you take care of yourself? Does anybody want to share? I like music. Yeah.
We have so many activities here until I have to ask myself, okay, now, what's on for tomorrow? And there may be that one day that I'm not doing anything, and I say, yes, I can wake up and I can even go back to sleep if I want to. But there are so many things. And the relationships that we have with other people on our floors or in our areas is so wonderful.
That's amazing. That is such a good, right? It's amazing. That's a good problem to have, right? Yeah. But to also think that it's okay to say no sometimes, right? I think what they call it fear of missing out, right? Sometimes we don't want to say no because we're like, gosh, I want to be down there because I want to see my friends. What if I miss out, right? But also there's a point in your life where you're like, I'm okay, it's okay, I want to say no. I'm just going to stay in my room and relax, right? But that's an amazing problem to have. But really, yeah, thinking about it, and it's not, we say, right, when we talk about feelings and things like that, it's not good or bad, right? Even good things can stress us out, expecting grandchildren, expecting a new great-grandchild, right? Going on a trip, right? And think about, I love to travel, but preparing for that trip stresses me out.
One other thing, I use some extra time that I have, that I'm in the house, especially on Sunday after church, after lunch, and I say, you know, that desk looks so bad. If something should happen to me, my kids are gonna come and say, look at all this junk mom had in here. So I use some of that time sometimes to clean out some things, turn on the TV, and then clean out some of the drawers that I think the kids won't talk about.
That's so true, right? But again, it's a positive thing, it's a great thing that your children are coming to visit, but there are things that can stress you out, right, about that. So it's how we manage, right? I always tell people, feelings are neither good or bad, right? It's how you address, how you respond to them, right? The things that you can do to process them, right? So again, even the good things can cause stress, and that's not a bad thing, it's just how do I process that, and how is that gonna make me feel okay? This is the routine I need to do to make me feel better about those things? Absolutely, right? Remember, but that's all, right? That's looking at ourselves holistically, that mental health part of it, all of that. Thank you for sharing, thank you so much. So again, our next area, which I think again most people think about, is get moving, right? Our physical activity can improve our brain health, right? We think about our body, but we don't always think our brain, right, is our largest and strongest organ, right? So when we want to exercise our body, we're also exercising our brain, or making our brain healthier, right? So what is the science telling us, right? So consistent cardiovascular activity, right? So again, things that will help us when it's making our heart pump a little bit more, right? So again, getting that blood flow going. So really good, right? People, any increase in movement can impact overall health, right? So again, just the slightest thing. Doesn't mean you have to go out there and run marathons, right? But if you're taking a walk, maybe do something, right, that's a little more vigorous, or if you want to try, I know if they have like a dance class here, right, or an exercise class. And I was thinking, challenge yourself, try something new. I think our routines are great, but sometimes we automatically say no because that's not my thing, I don't like dancing, that's not me. Try it out, right? Because you think, I remember it's so funny, I love Zumba, maybe see Zumba, right? Zumba class, the dancing, and I would see these girls in their nice little outfits come in and, thinking they were gonna manage. It's an hour class and it's high intensity sometimes, and they couldn't last but a few minutes, right? Because they might be doing other exercise, but they weren't used to the cardio exercise. So they're like, wow, this is new. I thought I was in fit health, but cardio is very different than lifting weights or things like that, right? So think about, just again, challenge yourself. If you don't like it, don't do it, but try it out, and you may find that you like things, right? And you really diversify, right? Kind of that exercise, that you're doing, right? So again, really kind of thinking about your physical activity, what activities do I want to try? And I think the good thing is probably here too is, right, how things can be modified, right? Again, there's so many things that you think, well, if I'm in a walker, if I'm in a wheelchair, I can't do those things, but I'm sure they have the exercises here, right? That it's modified. You can do it from your chair, right? You can do it sitting down. You can do different steps, different routines that are still getting you moving and going, but they're going to make it to you, right? And what works for you. So whether you can stand and walk around and dance around, or you can move around in your chair or your walker, right? It's all doing you good when you're getting moving, right? But again, how can I build more activity into my day, right? And who may ask to join me, right? I think that's always fun too. If you like to do things by yourself, I think it's always fun in numbers, right? So if you find a buddy, if you want to go walking or you want to go to a class, if you can find somebody that will do that for you, right, with you, it's a lot more motivating too, right? I think that person kind of, when you're not having a good day and you really don't feel like going, but that person can kind of convince you, come on, right, let's go, that they can kind of encourage you to do that, right? So that physical activity, again, things to think about, those tips, right, again, and find things that may be already part of your day, right? My whole thing with talking about this too is I never want to make it, right, just another thing I have to do, right? You don't want to make it feel like, God, it's just, I don't have time I don't want to do an hour walk. You don't have to do an hour walk, right? If it's 10 minutes, right, things that you're already doing, how can I bump it up a little bit? How can I change it up a little bit? But still things that you're enjoying, right, that you're doing, right? And again, right, start small. short amounts of physical activity add up, right? That's another thing too, right? And we want to stay positive. We want to feel like we succeeded. You know, if I told myself tomorrow I'm going to go 3 times a week, I'm going to walk an hour 3 times a week, that is not my life, right? I am busy, I have things to do, so I feel like I failed. If I tell myself that and I make that goal and I don't make that, you know, then I don't feel good. But if I tell myself the next, 3 days, I'm gonna walk 20 minutes, right, or whatever that is, and I do it, and then I'm, God, that feels good because I succeeded, and then you do more of that, and you do more of that, right? We wanna feel like we're succeeding and we're meeting those goals, right? So that's what I say, right, start manageable, doable goals, right? And then again, try something fun, ask your friends and neighbors to join you. Again, I think it's so amazing when y'all have classes and things here to do. You've got all that built in, right? And you just need to come and enjoy it, right? And again, the next area that we're gonna look at is healthy eating. Again, another one that's kind of a given, but we don't always, sometimes have to take a pause and think about what we're eating, how we're doing that routine. So again, what the science is telling us, again, what's good for the heart is also good for the brain. So we want to find those nutritious foods that are going to fuel our brain, right? Eating a balanced diet. So when we talk about those risk factors, hypertension, right? So those heart disease, cancer, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, stroke, and diabetes. These are all kind of things that will hopefully reduce some of those risk factors. And even obviously if you have those diagnoses already, that's even more so why, right? You want to maintain these healthier habits, right? Just because again, you have that. I tell people too, 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with hypertension. It's a family trait. It's one of those, it's modifiable, but it is a family, it's hereditary. But I have been working hard because I don't want to be on medication, right? I don't want to be on that medication. So as much as I can, sometimes again, you can't help it. That is genetics. But there are some things that are modifiable, and if you can change those habits, I think, has anybody had that where you go to the doctor and you feel good because maybe they're reducing a medication, maybe not giving you another one, but reducing, how much you take, that feels good, right? So again, as opposed to adding more medications, right? So, so the association, we do recommend or support, well, we have 2 dietary things. So there's what we call the DASH diet. So again, that's dietary approaches to stop hypertension. Again, right? So, and then the Mediterranean diet. So we'll talk a little bit more. But the key elements of these, because those diets include fruits and vegetables, nuts, beans, and whole grains, lean meats, fish and poultry. Right? There's fats, but there's good fats as well. Of course, limiting sugar and salt. And then there's a lot of so like the FDA, even if you go on, like the FDA has a website, and it's really neat because it actually even has where also specific, I also have to make sure I tell people this too, right? It is specific to you at times, right? Because it could mean as a man versus woman, right? Our bodies are very different. So again, just because someone says you should be eating a certain way, it's because it's their body, right? A man having a diet the same as you probably isn't going to work, right? Even as age, the FDA has on, the USDA has where they do like the plates, right? They tell you like how much vegetables and things, but they even have, again, really great information on over a certain age. If I'm over 65, these are things I should be considering, right? Because someone like me, the way I eat, the things I should be eating are going to change, right, as I age, right? And also because of appetite, right? I know my parents are both, in their late 70s. They don't get as hungry. Right? They share plates a lot more often now, right? Because they're not as hungry. So again, I do preface this and make sure I kind of do a disclaimer that just because we say these things, you really want to look at, right, talk to your doctor, look at what things are working for you. But overall, any of those things that are kind of the DASH and Mediterranean that are giving you those good fruits and right vegetables and lean meats, right? Overall, that's usually a good kind of guide for that, right? So again, how can I cook healthier, or they prepare, right? I'm sure these amazing meals, right? They prepare, you can prepare for yourself too, right? Thinking about what goes in them, what kind of things I can swap out, when I used to like a little, fried chicken, can I do baked chicken, right? So those little things, like even, right, the stuff that we put in, the sweeteners, right? How the oils that we're cooking with, right? Just thinking about those slight changes that can be made. And then what new foods are you willing to try? And sometimes we get in those habits of, I will never eat peas disgust me. But if I try them with certain things, you know, I can hide them, right? It's like when you were children, right? You would kind of blend things up so they wouldn't tell that you put vegetables in, right, in certain things, right? Sometimes you have to hide them to, you know, get some of those things in. So, again, overall tips, right? Using some olive oil or another healthy oil, right? Instead of those heavy butters, you know, looking at sodium-free spices, right? Things that that you're actually cooking with, right? Not just what's in the food, but what they're using to cook it with. And then again, focus on what you can add in. Remember, so you can hide some stuff, but right, am I adding in the fruits and veggies that I need? Right, building those meals around those kinds of things. But again, there's a lot of information. Again, the USDA is a great site, and I pulled a lot of those for people. Again, especially because again, there's for women, for a certain age, men, all kinds of like those things that you have to really think about, right? Not just because again, you're individual, what works for you, and especially right if you have other diagnoses, right? Other medications that you're taking that can affect your diet, right? There's some, you know, blood thinners that you can't have greens, right? If you're taking a certain, you know, blood thinner, right? So again, talk to your doctor about what's working for you or what you need to kind of, you know, make some changes possibly on to help you, right? This is another one. So vitamins and supplements. That's a big one. Throughout my career, it's amazing kind of you learn. So the World Health Organization, right, in 2019 said that vitamins and supplements should not be recommended to reduce the risk of cognitive decline and dementia. And I'm going to say a little bit piece about this because I hear a lot of it when you watch commercials, right, and you hear Prevagen, right, or you hear another medication that if you take these things, it's going to help with your brain health, right? First and foremost, talk to your doctor. Or you can also, always talk to your doctor, but we also have a 24-hour helpline. I have the magnets there. If you did grab one coming in, please grab one going out. Anything that you may see, hear on the television about dementia, cognitive issues, please call them. We have trained clinicians that get that information from our medical science team on a regular basis, so they can kind of walk you through, these are some things that we're hearing about that. Sometimes when we hear those over-the-counter medications, they have not been through extensive clinical trials, right? So when the association talks about medications that may be working or not, that's because they've gone through very rigorous clinical trials, right? Meaning years of studies, study numbers that are in the thousands, right? Depending on what the medication they're researching, as opposed to maybe some of these medications that they may have studied but are not, right, or are not as extensive. So again, we would say be a savvy consumer, right? If it's too good to be true, if it sounds good, right? If it's supposed to be quick, nothing's ever fast and easy, right? So we just say be a savvy consumer, think about that. And also even over-the-counter, right? Any over-the-counter supplements that, remember, if your neighbor says, oh gosh, fish oil, it's working for me, it's done wonders for me, and you want to go out and you want to go buy fish oil to take, check with your doctor first, right? Remember, you are not, you know, the same as your neighbor, you know, have the same diagnosis, taking the same medications. So sometimes those over-the-counter, you know, can interact with prescribed medications, right? Especially I had someone that they were prescribed a heavy doses of vitamin D for a reason, and then they wanted to take like a vitamin that had more vitamin D in it. So they were they were overdosing on that vitamin D. Again, just because you think it's right, it's there at the counter of the pharmacy and I can buy it because it's not prescribed. Just really, again, we just really want you to make sure, right, that you're aware of some of those false claims and that you're really thinking about, you know, overall. So when the doctors tell you bring all your medications, you're not just taking your prescribed medications, you're also taking all those over-the-counter things that you may be taking, some supplements that your doctor may not know about, right? So we definitely just really, you know, want to encourage that, right? And then next one we're going to talk about is, so challenging your brain may help lower risk of dementia, cognitive decline. True or false?
True.
Always true, right? Always true. Like we said, right? You were never too young, too old to make sure that you were challenging, continue to challenge your mind, right, for that risk of cognitive decline. So when we look at what are activities that are challenging yourself, right? Not just your physical, your emotional, your mental, right? That are challenging your brain on short and long-term benefits, right, for that. So what is cognitive engagement, right? I think you all probably do this more than anybody. Any communities where you can gather and be with others, right? Anything that's gonna keep your minds active and challenged, coming to presentations like this, right, as a group, going to those fun activities, right, those games, those dances, those, right, all those things that you can be around your neighbors and talk and socialize, right? You may be learning, right, because again, you may be learning new skills, or you're working on something challenging, right? I also say too, right, because when you're engaging, right, you're talking to someone, your brain is processing all that, right? There was a study, it's not a part of this, but there are studies all around for everything dealing with kind of the risk factors for dementia. And they were looking at hearing loss, right? Two parts. Mainly one, because people were saying, gosh, telling their loved ones, I can't hear, right? The TV's loud, right? There's something wrong with my hearing. Go to the doctor. The actual organ, the mechanism of the ear is fine. There's not a problem with that. Then come to find out, they found out that it was a dementia, because it was actually the brain that was being affected and not talking effectively to the ear, right? Remember, I talked about your brain is your central system, so your brain is talking to everything. So when that's getting damaged, well then, yeah, it's not telling you that you're hearing those things right? So that was one part. The other part of that is, if you are truly having hearing loss, right, and you're not listening, you're not being able to hear conversations well, then what's happening? Your brain isn't processing, right? Again, I love to share. I will tell you, this was a great reason why I got my dad to get hearing aids. My dad is a social butterfly, loves talking. Has never met a stranger, right? Goes to a senior center, very active. But we were noticing again, that TV's just so loud, Dad. You're not hearing well. I'm fine. I'm not getting hearing aids. I'm not getting hearing aids. Then he would go to the center, and then I think he was realizing he wasn't hearing the conversations in the groups. And that was bothering him, and I said, absolutely, Dad, if you get hearing aids, you'll be able to hear and process, right? Again, your brain is gonna start to decline if you're not engaging and you're not listening to those things. So it worried him enough that he went and got himself hearing aids. So he is back in his normal environment, but right, so we talk about that and really looking at, right, this cognitive engagement on all these areas, right? It's not just because we want, we enjoy talking to people, absolutely, but there's an exchange, right, in person, right? I know during the pandemic it was so tough, we tried to stay connected, right? We still do virtual options, it's good for people that can't get out, but in person, right, is always our first. We want to be with people, we want to get engaged, we want to, right, stay socially active with people. And again, because the science is telling us that the more you are involved in this, the more you engage in this, hopefully that you're reducing that risk, right? So when your brain is forming those new connections, right, keeping those great connections that you have, and it's encouraging that blood flow to the brain, right, mentally stimulating activities, really can improve cognition. So again, we talk about too, we'll ask about those medications that they promote on TV. A lot of times we say, you could probably get the same benefit as doing a puzzle game on your phone or the computer that are free, right? AARP has some amazing things online, right? Free. You're not paying for any of that, right? So instead of paying for a pill, maybe try it, and they've kind of shown that it kind of has the same advantages as those kinds of things, right? So again, really informal education, right? I always say too, still engaging in learning, coming to these things, right? Learning about all those amazing things that you're still doing for yourself and your brain that you are engaged in, right? So again, challenging yourself, right? What are new hobbies or skills that you want to learn? Again, it's always fun to do things that we like, but are you challenging yourself to try things that you maybe haven't done before? Or if you're doing a puzzle game, we tell people, oh, I like to do it because, gosh, I can run through that word puzzle and it's really quick. Well, then it's not challenging enough for you, right? We want you to be able to sit there for a while. Even if you're not successful, New York Times has some games on there, and I like to play them. And I'm so disappointed when I fail at it, but then I think, but I actually did it. It kept me occupied for 20 minutes, and my brain was thinking whether I could figure out the puzzle or not, right? My brain is still working. So, right, it's not about you winning every time, right? Or you can run through that game. It's, am I challenging myself, right? Am I challenging, especially too, if you're one, we would say too, like, maybe you are a more thinker, right? You like activities that have to do with meditation or, right, or yoga, but you're not so prone to like the physical things. Try that, right? Remember, because it's also working the different parts of your brain, right? Physical activity, works your brain different than a mental activity, right? So you wanna maybe try a little bit of both, right? Challenging yourself to doing those kinds of things, right? Just to try it out, right? So again, right, those tips on those staying engaged and active, right? Taking a class, right? Or again, when Lucy brings all these wonderful presentations to you all, right? Just sitting in, maybe you think it's not something that really pertains to me, but you wanna learn more about it, right? Trying those classes, cooking, whatever learning it is, a language, right? Playing different games. So anything you can think of, right, that's gonna challenge yourself. So again, I think this is kind of, we're gonna bring it back to the stay connected is I think our last one. So right, we kind of talked a lot about this as the benefits of being in community, right, being around others. Again, the same thing I tell people, right, we all saw for sure during the pandemic that isolation was just so detrimental to everyone, right? Being isolated, not being able to be around people, so many people declined, right? Even our loved ones with dementia, we found a lot of our caregivers, unfortunately, we lost a lot of those individuals during that time because it just seemed to exacerbate, the disease seemed to just decline faster because they weren't around others, right? To no fault, it's just, unfortunately, right? So we then know that engaging and being around others, right, is so important to our brain health, right, overall. And again, when we stay engaged, then it can lead to, I have a friend now that can come with me to a cooking class or right to go walking, right? So I meet those friends that I can do things with also, right? So you're not isolated. So again, thinking about those things, how do I stay connected to others? How can I get involved in the community? And again, are there clubs, groups, right, that you'd like to join? I'm just really thinking of it overall, right? So again, those tips, right, volunteering, if there's things that you do around here, if you are interested in doing other things with volunteering, the Alzheimer's Association is always looking for amazing volunteers. We do go out to community presentations, we do virtual presentations. So if you are thinking about it, I'm gonna leave a few of my cards. We welcome anybody that might be interested in doing some things with the association or other groups that you may, again, there's always nonprofits that are always looking for volunteer opportunities for individuals. And again, right, do you have regular phone calls or chats with people that may be long distance from you, or are you checking in on somebody that may not have as many people to check on them, right, not be as active in the community? Maybe you can make sure you check in on them, keep in touch, right, making sure again that you're keeping in touch with family and friends, participating in events. And again, it is okay, right, I say to you, there's some times that it's okay to say no. Sometimes we just want to rest and we're not as social, that's okay, right? But it's more if you find yourself saying no and no more too often, right, and more often, and you become more and more isolated, and you realize I'm not as active and engaged, that, right? Check on your friends. If you see that they're disengaging, more, you might want to check on them, right? There could be other things that are going on. I was telling my parents that too, check on your friends. In the senior center when people aren't, coming as much, it could be because there's a medical issue, but are there other things that are going on, so they give them a call and check on them, right? So again, kind of to tie everything in, right, you can live healthier, no matter what your age, no matter, new things that you can try, right? You're never too old, you're never too young, to work on those things. So those areas of, right, looking at your sleep, smoking cessation if that's an issue for you, our mental health, our physical activity, eating healthy, challenging yourself, staying connected. I always think it's not on here, but I love that you brought that up, is spirituality, right? I think that brings in a lot, so whatever your faith is, whatever that means to you, that also brings in that emotional, right, that mental, that connectiveness, is really thinking about holistically, right, your spiritual self too. And that could be with nature. A lot of people find spirituality in nature. You like to go outside and you like to garden and you like to do those things, right? That is being connected, right, to something. And so last, we'd like to leave you always with resources. So again, the Alzheimer's Association, we do have a chapter office here. You are more than welcome. We have walk-in, people come in. If they have questions, sometimes we have families come in that are struggling. Maybe they got a new diagnosis, maybe there's a change in behaviors. We have what we call a care consult room at our office that we can schedule and come in and visit. But you can always reach the association on your 24-hour helpline. Those magnets I mentioned, please take it. No question is too big or too small. The amazing thing about that, because we have clinicians around the country, you can call at 2 o'clock in the morning, somebody answers. You can call now and somebody will answer. And so again, it could be just, it could be as simple as, I'm noticing this, I'm noticing this thing about myself or a loved one, what should I do next? To, I'm caring for my spouse and there's this issue, what do I do, right? So it's a gamut of, it runs a variety of different questions. Or again, I saw this on TV, this medication is supposed to help me with my brain, is it a good thing? And they'll kind of look up and they get that information, the recommendations. If you'd like to go online, we do have the ALZ.org, so you can search that information. A lot of good videos, all these presentations that we do, you can watch them. And we always want to do in person, so you can ask questions, but you can watch them online as well. And then I mentioned AARP. We do have a joint page with them, so it's called it's communityresourcefinder.org. What it is it's the association. You can find our online classes, you can maybe find some in-person groups. But AARP is also part of that, so you can click and you can go directly to AARP, kind of caregiver resources, all of their site, to look at other things as well. So that's a really great resource too. And I think that is everything. So, there's a lot to process. We did give you those activities, there's a little activity sheet. So that was one that, again, you don't have to fill it, but hopefully this maybe triggered something for you and be like, gosh, I really need to think about this. Please take the little worksheet. If there's things that you think you want to work on or that you want to share with somebody that they need to work on, you can please share that. But please take that. And if you think of something later, again, our helpline, you can always reach somebody any time of day on the helpline. Any other questions or?
I think you have this whole thing memorized, don't you?
I've been doing it for a while. I've been doing it
Yes.
for a while.
Wonderful.
And some of it, we do have our little guide here, but this is one of my favorite, I will say, this is one of my favorite presentations because again, it gives us a holistic view of, when we see people with cognitive decline or dementia, I think we stigmatize too much, right? Well, it's because you're old, right? You're older, but this is a presentation. We have audiences that I want to get to people when they're in their 20s and 30s, right? These are habits that, we should be starting now, but also that just because you are older doesn't mean you're too old to start these things, right? Or to, again, validate that you've been doing these great things and you want to keep doing that, right? So definitely, this is one of my favorite. I love doing this one in the community stuff. But again, thank you all so much, and I know we will be back for other things. We have some great events. If you all, I know, talk to Lucy. We have our Walk to End Alzheimer's. That's in October. Actually, they moved it to November now. It's physically at Fiesta, Texas, but there may be some other opportunities for some other things as you as a community. Again, because we are a nonprofit, we raise funds mainly to do what we do out in the community, and actually not mainly to do what we do in the community, but mainly to fund research to find a cure for this disease. And that funding does stay here locally. Because we have some amazing in our own backyard at UT Health. If you've heard of the Biggs Institute, they're doing some amazing research on dementia and other neurodegenerative diseases. So that's what we want to make sure, right? We want to find a cure for this disease, but also in the meantime, educate and help individuals that are living and families that are living with this disease. So thank y'all so much for your time. Enjoy having y'all. If you haven't, please, there's some sign-in sheets in the front. If you don't mind filling that out, if you haven't, and please take any of the handouts with you if you did grab one. So, thank y'all so much.